We've all been there before. You're talking to someone, everything's going great, and then all of a sudden you run out of things to say, and it gets extremely quiet and extremely awkward. But don't worry, today we're going to solve all that. With everything I'm about to show you, this will never happen to you again. So let's get into it. So as you can see here, I have this divided up into guiding mindsets and actionable techniques. What I mean by that is these are the big principles, like the bigger picture ideas that you need to be following. And these are just little techniques that can help you get towards those. So let's get into it. The first mindset is lower the bar for what you need to say. This one is huge because really a lot of the times when we run out of things to say, we aren't just running out of things to talk about. It's that we don't think we have anything good enough to talk about. So if you just lower your standards of what needs to come out of your mouth, it will help a lot because you'll be surprised. It doesn't really matter what you talk about. You can talk about just about anything. And along those same lines, there doesn't even have to be a logical connection between everything you're saying. Normally we're trying to string together this perfect conversation of this point leading into that point, leading into that topic, like it has to flow perfectly. But that's not true at all. In fact, by jumping from topic to topic just out of the blue, it can actually make you seem a little bit more unpredictable and interesting, which is definitely a good thing. Also, another thing about lowering the bar is that it helps you not take yourself so seriously. Because by having such a high standard of what you need to say, it's like you're trying to put on this show to be like perfect to everyone or something. But really, if you just lower the bar and just say whatever you want, it kind of helps because then you're a little bit looser, you know? You don't have to feel this pressure of having to be perfect. You can just talk about whatever you want to say. And another added benefit of doing that is that the more topics you talk about with someone, the closer a connection you're going to feel. Because in general, as you experience more things with a person, you feel more connected to them. And so topics are just like other environments. The more topics you talk about with someone, the closer you're going to feel with them. So that's another added benefit. So the first tip that you can put into action related to this point is free associate. All this really means is that you are just stringing together thoughts based on a word from the last thing that was said. So essentially, if you're just talking about what the other person studies, and they tell you environmental engineering, you can either say something about the environment, like, oh, I really care a lot about the environment. How about you? Or engineering, you could say, oh, I know someone who's an engineer, but they're studying this other kind, and they do this and this and this. How are those different? Or you could even say, oh, well, I study this. You know, you see how you could take any word from what the other person said or from what you just said and expand on it in some totally different direction. That's free association, and it can be very helpful. And the second technique is use the environment. This one is very similar to free association, except instead of bouncing off the last thing that was just said, you can just look at something in the environment around you and come up with something to say based on that. So if you see that you really like the furniture in the place that you're at, then you could say, oh, you know, I've actually got a lot of experience with furniture. I had to help my dad move a few times and blah, blah, blah. Like, it doesn't really matter what you talk about, really, as long as you have something to talk about and you say it in a cool way, which we're going to get into later. The second guiding principle is vibes are greater than words. What does this mean? It's kind of similar to the first point. It doesn't really matter so much what you say, it's more about how you say it. It's about the vibe you're giving off and the vibe of the conversation. That's really what most people remember. You want to put yourself in the same vibe that either you want the other people to be in or the vibe that they want to be in. In other words, for example, let's say you're at a party and you try to start a conversation, but then you just start talking about work and you're starting to get all serious and maybe even a little sad just talking about work. Instead, maybe you should just talk about something lighter, a little bit lighter conversational topic. Like I said, lower the bar, just say whatever comes out of your mouth and just say it in a fun way. Because as I said, vibes are more important than words. So if you're at a party, people want to be having fun. They don't really care so much what you're saying, more just the way you're saying it and the overall vibe that you're contributing. So the first actionable tip in this category is be animated. So basically, Doesn't matter what you're talking about. Whatever you're talking about, just be animated and make it interesting. For example, if you're talking about something that you're passionate about, maybe be passionate and speak about it passionately. Or if you're saying something that you think is funny, smile, laugh. Just whatever you're saying, do it extremely animated. If you're genuinely curious about something, like, don't say, so what do you study? Say, so what do you study? Those little details will take you a long way. In fact, such a long way that the second tip here is refine your sub-communications. That's exactly what I was just talking about here. It's like your facial expressions, your body language, which I just made a video on, put that in the top right corner, and your vocal projection, all those sort of things. The little details that are outside of the words that you're saying that still communicate something in the interaction. So refining your sub-communications can greatly increase your overall vibe in a conversation because you won't be so focused on the words. Instead, you will be focused on making everyone, including yourself, feel better. Which leads into the third point, self-amuse. This is a very broad category, but basically you want to talk about the things that either you are passionate about or that you think are funny or that you think are interesting, because this will do two things. Not only will it make you naturally just be more animated and have a better overall vibe, but it will also make sure that you're always enjoying the interaction no matter what. If you're talking about something that's funny, it's still gonna be funny to you whether they thought it was funny or not. If you're talking about something you love talking about, you're still gonna have a good time talking about it whether they like it or not. In my case, for example, when I started doing YouTube videos, I wasn't sure what I was gonna do them on yet, and so I just did them about anything. And I talked about random things like cleaning my room or whatever. And I would look back at the footage and I could hardly watch myself. It was so cringy and I couldn't really figure out why. But then as soon as I started talking about things that I was actually passionate about, I realized that there was this something about the way I was saying it that it was just so much easier to watch and so much better. And so I realized it's actually because I was talking about stuff I didn't care about. The more you talk about things that amuse you, the more animated you'll be, the better vibe you'll have, and the better everything will be overall. So the only tip here is basically what I've already been talking about. Talk about your passions, your interests, the things you think are funny, etc. Oh yeah, and one last tip about self-amusement is the other benefit is you have no idea what the other person finds interesting or funny or whatever. So it makes no sense to go into it trying to push their buttons, trying to make them laugh or find something that they think is interesting, because really it's just going to make it harder on you. It's better to just say what you think is funny, and if they think it's funny, great, then you'll connect over that. And that's the very last point about this. Make sure when you're talking about your passions and interests that if something comes up that you have in common that you both like, stick with that topic for a while, because it's going to be one that's going to be very easy for both of you to talk about. You're going to bond a lot over it and you're going to say it in a very animated way, and it's just going to feel very, very good. So the last mindset I have for you, let them talk. This is basically if all else fails and you've been trying to do these things, but then you get to a point where there's nothing really else to say and it does get quiet for a second, let them do the talking, either by just embracing that awkward silence for a couple seconds and they'll probably end up saying something, or what's better is to ask open-ended questions or why. Not literally the question why, because that will sound kind of weird and annoying, but basically if they're talking about something and you can inquire further about that to get more behind their motivations for why they feel that way or why they do that. That's very good because it'll help them open up and it'll make it so you have less work. You don't have to talk so much. Same goes for the open-ended questions. If you ask them something like, where are you from? If they say they're from, let's say Denver, and then you say, oh, do you like Denver? That's horrible because then all they can say is like yes or no. Or if they're feeling very talkative, then maybe expand on it a little bit. But it's better to say something like, oh, what do you like about Denver? Then they're forced to say a little bit more than just yes or no. And this leads me into one bonus anti-tip here. I've heard a lot of people say, a great open-ended question to ask is, what's your story? In all honesty, how do you feel when someone asks you that? Personally, for me, when someone asks, what's your story? I just get extremely overwhelmed because I have no idea where to start. I don't know if I should talk about my childhood or my family or what I do for work or where I went to high school. Like, I have no idea where to start, and it just kind of freaks me out and honestly just makes the whole conversation a lot more awkward. So I'm just gonna go out there and say, try not to ask what's your story, because that's just a little too broad and it might overwhelm someone. I've learned how to deal with that question a little bit better now, and I could probably come up with a decent answer. But at least at first, when people would say something like that, I was just like, what do I even say? So probably shouldn't do that to people. That wraps it up for all of the mindsets and techniques for learning how not to run out of things to say, or I guess how to talk forever. So remember, lower the bar for what you need to say by free associating and using the environment to just bounce off random ideas. Vibes are greater than words, meaning remember to just be animated. It doesn't really matter so much what you say. It's more how you say it and the sub-communications and the overall vibe. Remember to always self-amuse, because that way you'll always be talking about something that you're passionate about or you're interested in or you think is funny, and no matter what, you should probably enjoy it, and it will form a better connection. And last but not least, let them talk, because by asking open-ended questions or further inquiring about why they said something that they said, that will allow them to open up more and you won't even have to talk. So that's how you avoid awkward silences. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe and click the little bell next to it so you get notified every time I drop a video every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. And if you know someone who could benefit from this, go ahead and feel free and share it with them, because my goal here is to help as many people as possible, because I know what it's like to go through social anxiety, and I also know more or less how to get out of it, because I've done so. So I really want to help as many people as possible. So share, share, share. So go out there and put this stuff into action, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.